Okay, so now we're going to be working on the mouth because we've given some detail to the eyes and around the nose. So we're working on strengthening those shadow areas on the mouth. So to see this, I'm going to post my reference picture alongside my drawing so you can see what I'm looking at. And remember, if you're having trouble seeing the values, one thing you can do is you can squint. So I'm looking at the shadows on the mouth, and usually the upper lip is a little bit darker, more in shadow than the bottom lip. And I'm going to exaggerate that a little bit in this picture. And you can see his mouth is more in shadow on that right side, and that's because that's the shadow side is the right. The left is where the light's coming from. And then that area right in the middle of his lips, both on the top and the bottom, that's a little bit lighter still because that's the part that sticks out the farthest. And remember, stuff that is convex kind of pops out, it's going to be hitting the light. So I'm darkening both corners of the mouth and letting it fade to a little bit lighter right in the center there. So for this entire lesson today, we're still sticking to the red pencil. Next lesson, we're going to start to add in the white, but for now, keep the white pencil away. And there's a reason that we save the white for later on, and it's because you really don't want the red and the white to mix. If they do mix, what's going to happen is you're going to create this kind of murky, muddy pink color. And you want to avoid that. You want to let the gray of the paper do some of the work for you. Those of you who are working on white paper, same thing. You want to let the white of the paper be your highlights or your lightest areas. So that way you're not feeling obligated to cover everything. In fact, it's going to look awkward if you try and cover your whole paper with shading. So I'm looking at that nose too, and I'm trying to get the cast shadow in on the nose and trying to see how that cast shadow is falling. Just want to remind you, cast shadows in general are a little bit sharper edged, crisper than a form shadow. There's a little shadow on the left-hand side of the nose, right near that left nostril, but that's a form shadow. So that one I'm going to be careful to make soft. And those shadows on the lips, the one to the left in the corner is a form shadow. There's one on the right too, but there's also a little cast shadow in there where the two lips meet. And then there's a little cast shadow below that lower lip. You can see that there's a little shadow there. That's really important that you include the shadow below the lower lip because that bottom lip sticks out and there's a little indentation there. There's a little groove. You can feel it just below your own lower lip. It kind of pulls in there and then the chin kind of pops out. It's a little bit round. So here's what I have so far. I'm looking at the face and comparing it to the neck, and I'm realizing I need to give some attention to the neck too. And remember, you want to compare shadows. So I'm looking at the shadow that's on the right side of the face, and I'm going to be comparing that to the neck and asking myself, which one's darker? Solid shade, what's going to happen is you're going to have some flattening going on. So if you want to try making it look 3D, you have to look for the subtle shifts in value. So that what that means is you want to look for any kind of gradient where one value fades into another or it becomes lighter in some way. It's almost like turning up the volume or turning it down, but we're talking instead of sound, we're talking about lights and darks. And one way you can do that is you can also look at a black and white image of your model, or you can squint your eyes, which is something that I do all the time. And that shadow below the neck part of it's a cast shadow, but then it kind of morphs lower down, like near the collarbone, into more of a form shadow. And he's got a little bit of an Adam's apple there. And even on the Adam's apple, I wouldn't try to outline it. I would try and get that to be a soft edge, and it is multi-values within there. Now we're moving on to the hair, and you can see that I have a very loose kind of gestural approach to the hair for now. Yeah, you can kind of see some strands, but I'm letting it be rough and kind of scribbled. I'm not trying to depict every strand of hair, not right now, and probably not towards the end either. But I am working on shadow shapes within the hair. And usually with hair, hair tends to be darker in value than the skin tone. And within the hair too, there should be areas that are darker and areas that are lighter. And it's important to recognize where the light source is coming from, because that plays an important role in the hair. So on this guy, the light is coming from the left. So that means that the right side is in shadow. So the hair on the right side is also falling into shadow, especially on the sides of the head. So that right side near his forehead, near his temple. That's the darkest area. But then there's another darker patch on the left side, but not quite as dark as one on the right. And I'm more concerned with value and toning than I am with those individual hairs. We'll get to those, but not right now. I do want to kind of convey the motion of the hair and the way certain chunks of hair overlap others and kind of crisscross in places. And I'm trying to experiment with the blending stump to see if I can blend some of those tones too. One thing we're going to do later on is we're going to go in and we can erase out highlights too. And hair can be tricky. I'm not brilliant at hair either. But I am looking for those areas. Where is it darker? Where is it lighter? What does that shadow shape look like? Because it will have a shape to it. It's also important to have little wispy hairs to transition to the hairline. Like, you don't want to just have it abruptly go from skin to hair. There's these little tiny hairs usually at the temple and softer, lighter hairs, usually a little bit thinner than your normal hair type around the temple. So that's like the forehead area. So you might want to think about that. Like, don't go too dark at first, and it shouldn't be too stark of a contrast between the skin of the forehead and then all of a sudden, boom, really dark hair. And I think we also talked about before that hair tends to go a little bit lower towards the ears than we think it does, even if it's a woman. And you might be worried that it's going to look like the person has sideburns, but you just go a little way down. If you don't do it, it will look even weirder without those. This is all I'm planning on doing to the hair today. That does not mean it's done. Just like with the rest of the drawing, like, there's no area here that's finished. But I'm going to leave it as it is right now. And I'm fine-tuning areas on the face that need more red. So areas that might need to be darkened. But again, you do want to leave a large portion of this drawing inside the face with the paper exposed. You don't want to shade over everything. So I'm just comparing the values on the shadows. Next class, we will start to use the white, but just because we start to use the white doesn't mean that we won't darken certain areas with the red pencil or adjust things. So we're going to keep both those, the red and the white pencil handy, as well as having an eraser, preferably a kneaded eraser. So here's what it looks like right now. I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. So you see I've worked on the neck, I've worked on the face a little bit more, and the hair. And then, yay, next class we can work on the white a little bit. That'll be fun.